The recording was 11 seconds long. That was the first thing Fleet Coordinator Ven Sarath noticed when the file appeared in the diplomatic archive. Not its contents, not its origin timestamp, not the fact that it had been transmitted on a frequency that no registered civilization was supposed to know existed. Just the length, 11 seconds. A message from a species that had been formally requesting Galactic Council attention for 31 standard cycles, ignored across 4 petitions, 2 emergency declarations, and 1 incident report that the Council had quietly reclassified as a navigational anomaly. 11 seconds. Ven Sarath played it once, then sat very still for a long time, then opened a channel to the council chamber and said, in a voice stripped of its usual bureaucratic texture, "Pull back the 7th exclusion fleet. Pull back all of them. Do it now. No explanation. No attached documentation. No committee vote." The fleets turned back. 31 cycles earlier, the species called themselves humans. The Galactic Cooperative called them Catalog Entry 7841C, a pre-integration civilization, carbon-based, single planet, technologically adolescent. Dangerous in the way a child holding sharp objects was dangerous, not maliciously, but through ignorance of consequence. The first contact delegation assigned to humanity's solar system was a routine one. Junior diplomatic staff. A standard cultural assessment vessel, the Veth Mora, crewed by a team of 12 under cultural assessor, Pran Olesi, who had conducted 47 first contact evaluations and never once had to escalate beyond level 2 protocols. Pran Olesi would later describe the assignment as the one she had been least afraid of. She would not use that phrasing again. The Veth Mora made first contact in the standard fashion approach on a visible trajectory, broadcast on the species' dominant signal frequencies, wait for response. Humans responded within 40 minutes. That was fast. Faster than 70% of first contact species. Pran Olesi noted it in her file with mild curiosity and moved on. What she did not note, what she could not have known to note, was what the humans did in those 40 minutes while they waited. That gap in the record would haunt her for years. The human representative who spoke first was a woman named Commander Yara Vasquez, and the first thing she said, the very first thing, after a greeting translated by the contact interface, was not a question about who the Veth Mora represented, or how long they had been watching, or whether there were others like them. She said, "How long do we have?" Pran Olesi had run 47 first contacts. She had never heard that question first. "I'm sorry," she replied, the translation matrix making her voice flat and careful. "Before you classify us," Vasquez said. "How long do we have before you make a decision about us?" Pran Olesi filed this under Culturally Anxious Species. Recommend Standard Reassurance Protocol. She smiled through the visual feed and said the true thing, the thing she said to every new species. "The cooperative's evaluation process is thorough and fair. We mean no harm." Vasquez looked at her for a long moment. The expression on her face was one Pran Olesi could not quite decode. "Okay," Vasquez said. "Thank you." She did not look reassured. By the 3rd week of evaluation, Pran Olesi had filed 4 curiosity flags. Not alarm flags, curiosity flags, the kind that meant document this for cultural study purposes, no escalation required. The first, humans asked the Veth Mora crew an unusual number of questions about the Council's decision-making process, specifically about what happened to species that failed integration evaluation, specifically about timelines. The questions were polite. They were also, in aggregate, relentless. The second, the human facility they had been welcomed into, a combined governmental and scientific complex that humans called a research station, contained beneath its publicly presented laboratories and conference rooms a series of sealed lower levels that the crew's passive scans couldn't fully penetrate. The humans had not offered to show them these levels. They had not refused to either. They simply never mentioned them, The third, human behavior in high-stress simulations was statistically abnormal. The Veth-Mora ran standard cognitive assessment models, games, puzzles, resource allocation challenges, and the human participants performed roughly as expected, right up until the moment the simulations introduced scenarios with no optimal outcome. Scenarios where every available choice carried significant loss. Most species in those scenarios exhibited elevated stress markers, slowing decision cycles, optimizing desperately for any path that reduced harm. Humans made their decisions faster in those scenarios, not recklessly. Faster and quieter, with the specific quality of facial expression that the cultural assessment database had no existing category for. The fourth, Commander Vasquez kept a small object on her desk throughout every meeting. A smooth, dark stone. Pranalesi noticed it on day 1 and assumed it was decorative. On day 19, she finally asked about it. "My son gave it to me," Vasquez said, "before I came here." "Is it culturally significant?" Vasquez picked it up and turned it in her hand, not quite meeting Pranalesi's eyes. "It's a reminder," she said, "of what I'm doing this for." Pranalesi filed it under Human Object Attachment, Affective Bonding Behavior, moved on. She would think about that stone for the rest of her life. The first misinterpretation happened in week 5. One of the Veth-Mora's junior crew members, a sensor technician named Ovath, detected an unusual energy signature beneath the research station. Consistent with power generation, but irregular. Pulsing in a pattern that didn't match any of the facility's declared systems. The crew's natural conclusion was reasonable. Humans were generating something they hadn't disclosed. Something powered. Something beneath the sealed lower levels. Pranalesi elevated the flag from curiosity to concern. She requested a facility tour. The humans agreed immediately. Within the hour, Vasquez personally walked the Veth-Mora team through the lower levels. Doors opening one after another, lights coming on in sequence. What they found was a water recycling system, old, cobbled together from 3 different generations of technology, jury-rigged in ways that made Ovath physically wince. The energy irregularity wasn't concealment, it was inefficiency. The system was badly optimized, burning excess power in pulses because nobody had been able to afford a full replacement in over a decade. Pranalesi apologized for the intrusion. Vasquez waved it off. "You can ask us anything you want," she said. "We don't have secrets from you." Ovath filed the incident as resolved. But that night, unable to sleep in the crew quarters, he kept coming back to something small that didn't fit. If the facility's recycling system was that underfunded, that poorly maintained, why was the research station otherwise immaculate? Why were the public-facing labs equipped with the most current human technology? Where was the money going? He almost filed a second flag, then decided he was overthinking it. He was not overthinking it. Week 7 brought the first mention of the warning. It came not from Commander Vasquez, but from a younger member of the human delegation, a scientist named Dr. Eli Okafor, who worked in xenobiological mapping and who had a habit of asking questions that were slightly too precise to be casual. They were discussing the cooperative's expansion history, and Pranalesi was explaining the standard integration pathway: observation, evaluation, provisional membership, full membership, when Okafor leaned forward and said, very quietly, "What happens to civilizations at the border of the Karath Expanse?" The table went slightly still. Pranalesi kept her expression neutral. The Karath Expanse is a restricted corridor. Border civilizations receive standard protective designation under "they disappear," Okafor said. It wasn't an accusation. His voice was almost gentle. 6 civilizations in the last 40 cycles. The Council classifies them as voluntarily withdrawn from contact, but 3 of them had active first contact evaluations in progress when they went silent. That's in the public archive. We looked. Pranalesi said very carefully, "You've been reviewing the Council's historical archive. We've had 31 cycles," Vasquez said from across the table. Her voice was level. "We've been waiting a long time." That evening, Pranolesi sent her first encrypted message back to the council. Not a standard report, a personal message to her senior supervisor, Director Convelu. "The humans know more than they should. Recommend immediate escalation review." The reply came back in 2 days. 3 words: "Continue standard assessment." Nothing about the next 4 weeks was standard. Pranolesi would later reconstruct the timeline carefully, trying to identify the exact moment she should have understood what was happening. The closest she could get was a conversation with Vasquez in week 9, a conversation that had seemed at the time to be about philosophy. "Can I ask you something personal?" Vasquez said. They were alone in one of the smaller conference rooms, the formal evaluation session finished, the rest of the delegation gone. Vasquez had poured 2 cups of coffee, a human beverage, hot, bitter, which Pranolesi had come to find strangely comforting, and pushed one across the table. "Of course," Pranolesi said. "Do you believe the cooperative is just?" A pause. "It is the largest cooperative governance structure in the known galaxy. It has maintained peace across—" "That's not what I asked." Vasquez wrapped her hands around her cup. "Do you, personally, believe it's just?" Pranolesi looked at her, at the careful steadiness of her expression, at the stone on the table beside her coffee cup, placed there without ceremony. "I believe it is the best system available," Pranolesi said finally. Vasquez nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "I wanted to know where you stood." She looked up. "For my own records." Pranolesi did not understand that answer for a very long time. The second misinterpretation happened at week 11, and it was the one that triggered a formal council review. Ovith's sensors picked up a new signal. Not from the research station this time, from orbit. A tight beam transmission, human origin, directed at a satellite the humans had placed in a position the Veth Mora hadn't initially flagged as strategic. The transmission was encrypted in a format the crew couldn't break. The Council's interpretation was immediate and alarming. The humans were communicating covertly with another party, possibly another cooperative species that had made unauthorized contact. Possibly a faction within their own government that opposed the formal delegation. Either way, a deception. The evaluation was escalated to level 3. A second vessel was dispatched. The Karith 7, a monitoring ship, positioned itself in the system without announcing its presence. 3 weeks later, the Karith 7's crew decrypted the transmissions. It was a continuous data feed to an archive satellite, a backup system. The humans were copying every document, every communication log, every assessment file from the evaluation process in real time, storing it off-site in encrypted form. Not to deceive the cooperative, to preserve a record in case the cooperative made them disappear. Just like the 6 civilizations at the Karath Expanse border. Pranolesi read the decryption report and sat with it for a long time. The humans hadn't been hiding something from her. They had been building evidence, in case something happened to them, in case nobody survived to speak. They had been afraid this entire time, and they had never once let it show. She reopened the cultural assessment database and found the expression she'd been trying to categorize since week 3, the one humans made in high-stress, no-win scenarios. There wasn't a category for it because the database had never encountered a species that made calm their stress response. The Council sent new instructions to Pranolesi at week 14. She read them twice. Then she went to find Vasquez. She found her in the station's small exterior courtyard. A strange space for a research facility, but humans apparently needed visible sky with some regularity, a biological requirement the team had noted with bemusement. Sitting on a low wall, reading from a paper document. Paper. Physical, irreplaceable paper. They've decided to expedite the evaluation, Pranolesi said. Vasquez didn't look up immediately. She finished the line she was reading. Then she folded the document carefully and looked at Pranolesi with that steady, unreadable expression. Expedite to what outcome? she asked. Provisional classification. They want a final recommendation within 60 days. And if the recommendation is negative, Pranalesi didn't answer. Vasquez looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for telling me yourself. I want you to understand. I haven't made my recommendation yet. The process is still Pran." It was the first time Vasquez had used her name without the title. "It's okay. We've had a long time to think about this." She picked up the stone from the wall beside her and held it for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket. 31 cycles, she said. "We've been waiting for someone to hear us for 31 cycles." She stood up, looked at the sky for a moment. That specific human gesture, tilting the face upward, which Pranalesi had catalogued early in the evaluation and never quite understood. "Tell me something," Vasquez said, still looking up. "In all your evaluations, all 47 of them, did any species ever send a warning? Not a petition, not a protest, an actual warning." Pranalesi felt something cold move through her. "No," she said. "No species has ever." "We did," Vasquez said. 31 cycles ago. The very first message we sent. Before the petitions, before the contact protocols, before any of this." She finally looked down. Her eyes were calm. Completely, unnervingly calm. Nobody responded. The third misinterpretation, the one that broke Pranalesi's professional composure for the first time in her career, happened the next morning. She had stayed up most of the night reviewing the earliest human transmissions in the archive. The ones from 31 cycles ago, flagged as first contact outreach, filed under pre-integration species, routine monitoring. She found the original transmission in under 10 minutes of searching. It was not an outreach message. It was not a request for contact. The humans had detected anomalous mass shadow activity at the edge of their solar system. Equipment well below cooperative standard, which was why the Council had never taken it seriously, but persistent, repeating measurements that suggested something large was moving through the outer system under concealment. They had transmitted in every direction they could reach. The message was structured in mathematical language, species agnostic, designed to be parsable by any civilization. It said, "We have detected movement. We do not know what is moving. We are telling you because we believe you should know. If something is wrong, we want to help. If something is out there, tell us." That was the warning, not a declaration, not a threat, an offer. 31 cycles later, 3 of the 6 disappeared civilizations had been border species in the exact region of the anomalous readings. Pranalesi's hands were shaking when she filed the report. Not because of what the humans had found. Because the humans had spent 31 years watching and recording and preserving, certain that what they'd found mattered, certain that someone should know, and when no one responded, they hadn't given up. They had kept measuring, kept building the archive satellite, kept documenting, kept waiting, and while they waited, they had built something in the sealed lower levels of every major research facility on the planet, something that wasn't a recycling system. She asked Okafor directly the following morning. No diplomatic framing, no protocol. "What's in the lower levels?" she said. "Not the recycling system. What's actually down there?" Okafor looked at her for a long moment. Then at Vasquez, who gave a small nod. "Infrastructure," Okafor said. "For what?" "Continuity." He paused. "We have a phrase, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We've been preparing for the worst for 31 years. Distributed archives, self-sustaining population habitats, long-range communication arrays pointed at every direction we know to point them, and a complete record." He met her eyes. "Of everything the cooperative has done in this region of space, every species, every disappearance, every reclassification." Pranalesi felt it then, the full weight of what she had been looking at sideways for months. The humans had built a dead man's switch, not a weapon, not a defense. Something older and stranger and far more dangerous to the Council's carefully maintained order, documentation, indestructible, distributed, automatically transmitted to every frequency they could reach the moment certain conditions were met. The moment no human hand touched the transmit delay for more than 30 days. If the cooperative made humanity disappear, the evidence went everywhere. Every species in the archive network, every border civilization, every curious junior assessor who had ever wondered about those 6 quiet disappearances. You built it in case we killed you, Pranalesi said. We built it, Vasquez said quietly from across the room, because we found something real and we weren't willing to let it be buried with us. The 4th misinterpretation was the Council's. Pranalesi's report arrived at Council chambers and was reviewed by a committee of 9. The committee's interpretation was sophisticated and coherent and completely wrong. They understood that the humans had created a blackmail apparatus, a threat structure, an implicit "if you move against us, we release everything." They understood the technical architecture. They appreciated the ingenuity. They classified it as an adversarial posture, a species that had preemptively weaponized transparency. What they did not understand was that the humans had not built it as leverage. They had built it because they genuinely believed someone needed to know about the Karath anomaly. The dead man switch was a delivery mechanism, not a negotiating position. If the cooperative played along, cooperated, investigated the border disappearances, the humans would have handed them the archive freely. They had tried to do exactly that for 31 cycles. The Council voted 7-2 to escalate to containment protocols. The 7th exclusion fleet was redirected, 14 vessels, enough to establish a full quarantine perimeter around a solar system. Enough to make a civilization quietly, efficiently disappear. The fleet was 3 days out from Earth's system when the message arrived. 11 seconds. Transmitted on a frequency the Council's most classified communication channels used internally, a frequency humans should not have known existed. Fleet Coordinator Vinceroth played it in his command chair alone. Commander Vasquez's face appeared on the screen. She looked exactly as she looked in every Veth Mora recording, steady, calm, that specific quality of stillness. She said, "We know why you're coming. We've known for 2 days. We have complete telemetry on your fleet's trajectory and drive signatures. We've been tracking cooperative vessels in this system for 11 years, and your exclusion fleet follows the same formation pattern as the Merhaf incident of cycle 4219. She paused. "We are not going to fight you." A breath. "We are not going to run. We are not going to negotiate. We are not sending this message to threaten you." Another pause, shorter this time. "We are sending it because 12 hours ago our long-range array detected active signatures in the Karath expanse, not passive mass shadow. Active, moving at acceleration profiles that suggest directed transit, not drift. We have attached full sensor logs to this transmission." Her eyes didn't move, didn't waver. "Whatever is out there, it's not hiding anymore." A final pause. Then, very quietly, "The warning still stands. With or without us." The recording ended. Vincerath sat very still, then opened every channel simultaneously and said the words he had never said in 30 years of fleet coordination. "All vessels, full stop, hold position, do not advance." He was not afraid of the humans. He was afraid of what the humans had found. The Cooperative's Emergency Science Division reached the Karath Expanse 14 days later. Pran Olesi was not on that mission. She was sitting across from Vasquez in the small conference room, 2 cups of coffee between them, when the initial readings came back. The 6 disappeared civilizations had not been absorbed, had not been evacuated, had not voluntarily withdrawn. They had been on the edge of detecting something very old, something that did not want to be detected. And the humans, small, single planet, technologically adolescent, afraid for 31 cycles in a way they had never let anyone see, had been the only ones loud enough, stubborn enough, persistent enough to keep transmitting into the void even when no one answered. Even when the math said stop. Even when every rational calculation pointed toward quiet. Even when the fleet was coming. Pranalesi looked at the stone on the table between them. Vasquez had said it there at the start of the meeting without comment. "Your son," Pranolisi said. "How old is he?" Vasquez smiled for the first time in weeks. It changed her face completely. 12, 13 next month. "Does he know what you've been doing?" "He knows I'm trying to keep the lights on." She picked up the stone, turned it. "He doesn't understand the details. But he knows I'm trying to make sure there's still a world when he's old enough to ask about it." Pranolesi thought about that. About a child on a planet 3 light years away, waiting for a parent to come home. About 31 years of transmissions into silence. About 11 seconds of video that had turned 14 ships around. "The Council will want to reclassify you," she said, "not as a threat, as something more complicated than the evaluation categories allow for." "What category would that be?" Pranolesi was quiet for a moment. "We have a designation for civilizations that have made significant contributions to galactic stability before formal integration. It's rare. It's only been applied 4 times in recorded history." Vasquez was watching her with that steady, unreadable expression. "We would need to change several procedural definitions," Pranolesi continued. "The integration pathway would be significantly altered. There would be council opposition. Would it pass? After what your sensors found in the Kareth expanse?" Pranolesi picked up her coffee. "Yes, I think it would pass." Vasquez nodded slowly. She set the stone down between them again. "Then we'd like to help," she said. "With whatever's out there. We've been watching it for 11 years. We know things about its movement patterns that your science division doesn't." She met Pranolesi's eyes. "We've been trying to give you that information since before either of us was sitting in this room." "I know," Pranolesi said. And then, because she needed to say it, because 31 cycles of institutional silence required someone to say it, "I'm sorry it took us this long." The expression that crossed Vasquez's face was not anger. It was not victory. It was something quieter and harder to name. The look of someone who had been holding the door open for a very long time and finally heard footsteps on the other side. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Just don't look away again." The 5th misinterpretation happened 6 months later, in a council chamber, and Pranolesi was there to watch it. The council had assumed, as they assumed with every newly elevated species, that humanity's integration would be a process of bringing them up to standard, teaching them, orienting them to cooperative protocols, communication structures, conflict resolution frameworks developed over 10,000 years of collective governance. They invited human representatives to their first full council session with the expectation of teaching. The human delegation arrived with 412 questions, organized by category, cross-referenced, sourced to specific incidents in the public archive. The session lasted 11 hours. The council answered 173 of the questions before requesting a recess. They reconvened twice more that week. By the end of it, 3 standing procedural orders had been voluntarily suspended pending review, and 1 council member, a species with a 400-year tradition of unbroken abstention on procedural votes, had filed a formal amendment proposal. Vasquez had not attended that session. She had stayed behind working with the Kareth science team. But Okafor had sat at the center of the human delegation, his questions precise and relentless and always shaped by the same quiet insistence. "This matters. Someone should know. We are telling you because we believe you should know." 31 cycles, Pranolesi thought, watching him. They had been doing exactly this for 31 cycles. Not fighting, not threatening, not hiding, just refusing. in that specific, exhausting, irrational human way, to stop. The thing in the Kareth expanse was real. It was old. It was aware that it had been detected. The cooperative's response took 2 years to assemble. Ships, resources, an unprecedented scientific and military coordination that hadn't been attempted in living memory of most of the Council's member species. The humans contributed sensor data, 11 years of it, patterns the cooperative's instruments had never been positioned to gather. Movement cycles, behavioral rhythms, spatial tendencies that, when laid against the disappearance timeline of the 6 civilizations, painted a picture so clear and terrible that 3 senior council members filed for voluntary psychological evaluation after reviewing it. What had taken the 6 civilizations had been predictable, was still predictable. With the human data, the combined fleet moved into position with 6 weeks to spare. No civilization had ever predicted it before. No civilization had ever been loud enough, persistent enough, stubborn enough to generate 11 years of continuous tracking data on something that did not want to be tracked. No civilization except the ones that had disappeared, and they had gone quiet before the data was complete. Vasquez was on the command coordination vessel when the response was launched, not in a combat role. In data integration, running the human sensor archive in real time against incoming readings, updating the prediction models, her team working in rotating 6-hour shifts for 9 consecutive days. Pranalesi spoke to her briefly on day 4, a 30-second connection through a military communication relay. "How are you holding up?" Pranalesi asked. Vasquez looked tired in a way she had never looked during the evaluation. Genuinely physically exhausted, but her voice was steady. "My son turned 13 last week," she said. "I know. I sent a formal congratulatory notation. I'm not sure if it reached." It did. He read it 4 times. A ghost of that face-changing smile. "He wants to be a xenobiologist. He thinks the cooperative is the most interesting thing that's ever happened." Pranalesi felt something she would not have had the vocabulary to name 18 months ago. "He's right," she said. "Tell the council that," Vasquez said, the exhaustion and the smile both present at once. "We're going to have 14 questions after this is over." The relay cut out. On day 9, the response worked. The cost was not clean. It was never going to be clean. 2 cooperative vessels were lost to the initial engagement. 7 human sensor technicians were killed when a relay station in the outer system was destroyed, people whose names Pranalesi added to her personal record and kept there because someone needed to keep them. In Vasquez's left hand, caught in a console rupture when the command vessel took structural damage, was rebuilt through cooperative medical technology that left it functional but permanently different in the way it moved. She accepted this without comment, filed no complaint, completed her shift. When Pranalesi saw her afterward in the ship's medical bay, Vasquez was holding the stone from her desk, her rebuilt hand, the fingers slightly wrong in their articulation, turning it over and over. "It still works," she said when she noticed Pranalesi looking at the hand. "Yes." The medical team said, "I meant the stone." Vasquez held it up. "Still fits." She closed her fingers around it. The hand worked. Different, but it worked. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. 3 months after the Kareth response, the council voted on formal designation. The vote was not close. The resolution they passed was unprecedented in 4,200 years of recorded cooperative history. Not integration, not provisional membership. A new category created because the existing language was insufficient, because no civilization had ever arrived in the galactic community by refusing, across 3 decades of silence, to stop talking into the void. The designation they settled on, after considerable deliberation, translated roughly into the cooperative's common tongue as first witness, a formal acknowledgement that a civilization had perceived and documented a threat to galactic stability before any established species had recognized it. It came with a seat on the Science Council, an open data sharing mandate. A formal apology, read into the permanent record by the council chair for 31 cycles of institutional silence. Vasquez received the notification in her office at the research station. She read it, set it down, picked up the stone, set the stone down on top of it. Okafor found her there an hour later and asked what she was thinking. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that we should update the archive satellite. Add the last 18 months. She looked up at him. "And I'm thinking we should build 3 more of them." "You think we'll need them?" She picked up the stone again. Her rebuilt hand moved differently around it, functional, adapted, not quite the same. "I think," she said, "that something else is going to happen. Out there. Something we won't expect and won't be ready for. And I think when it does, someone needs to have been watching." She turned the stone over. "So we keep watching. We keep the record. We keep transmitting. Even if nobody answers." The expression on her face was the one Pranolesi had never been able to categorize, the one the database had no entry for, the thing humans did instead of panic in the face of no good options. "Especially then," Vasquez said. In the permanent record of the Galactic Cooperative, the entry for catalog species 7841 SEC was eventually amended 14 times across 6 decades. Each amendment added something the Council had not understood when they filed the previous one. The final amendment, added in Cycle 31 of integration, included a note authored by Pranolesi herself. Retired by then, her name carried no official weight, but the Council included it because no one else had been there for all of it. The note said, "It is tempting to classify humanity's survival as a strategic achievement. This is incorrect. The humans were not strategic. They were persistent." There is a difference, and the distinction may be the most important finding in this record. They did not win because they were stronger or cleverer or better prepared. They won because they had decided 31 cycles before the question was ever formally put to them that they were not going to stop. Not for silence, not for dismissal, not for institutional indifference. Not for a fleet on approach. They kept the lights on because a child on a pale planet had a parent trying to make sure there was still a world when he was old enough to ask about it. This is not a strategic posture. It is not a doctrine. It is not a tactic. It is something the cooperative has never had a word for. Because we have never before encountered a species that treated the act of continuing as the strategy itself. We have one now. Ven Sarath kept a copy of the 11-second recording for the rest of his career. Not as evidence, not as documentation. He played it sometimes, late in his office when the weight of the fleet command sat too heavily. Vasquez's face, that voice, stripped of everything except the thing underneath. The warning still stands. With or without us, he was never able to fully explain what it did to him, hearing it. The closest he could get was this. He had commanded fleets for 30 years, and he had never once encountered something he could not assess, could not measure, could not fold into a decision matrix. The 11-second recording broke that. Not because it was a threat, not because it was a plea, because it was neither. Because it was a species facing the end of everything it was, and using its last transmission not to bargain or beg or fight, but to make sure someone still knew what it had found, still keeping the record, still refusing to stop. Even then, the galaxy had spent 31 years deciding whether humans were worth listening to. And in those 31 years, in silence, without acknowledgement or answer, the humans had been right about everything that mattered, and they had not stopped being right, and they had not stopped saying so. That was not strength in any form Ven Sereth had words for. It was something older than strength, something that did not require permission or acknowledgement or survival to remain true. He played the 11 seconds. He sat with it. And somewhere 3 light years away, a woman with a hand that moved slightly wrong turned a stone over in her rebuilt fingers and watched the dark between the stars, still adding to the record, still transmitting into the silence. Because something else was coming, she was certain of it, and someone needed to be the one who did not look away.